can toss and tumble on a sleepless bed, but you're wasting your time trying to lose the blues. Lose the blues.
In this episode, we look at debate, oracy, and free speech.
I am a free speech absolutist, right? And I would want everybody to agree with me, but I don't think I can tell all pupils that they have to be for free speech or they'll get kicked out of the school.
Can free speech be tolerated for pupils as well as for teachers?
I think it's community-centred. It's about the forming of bonds. It's Mantle the expert's about working in teams, and teams are about working together and sharing ideas and not always having your own way. Now, of course, within a properly functioning team, within a team that works efficiently, people's voices are heard and listened to. But that doesn't always mean that you follow that person.
Should pupils learn how to disagree? Should extreme views be at all tolerated?
If we look at the English national curriculum, there are 4 elements in the English national curriculum, and I think it's no coincidence that writing is number 4, after speaking, listening, and reading. But as a sector, we're obsessed with getting to the written outcome. It just seems that writing is privileged, and I really worry about that. And there's all sorts of reasons. I think that, we're obsessed with evidence, like nothing's happened in my lesson if there's no written work.
Should we teach children how to speak or just let their voices be heard?
Does debate matter?
We also have the John Catt Book of the Week. This week it's talking about oracy.
And the prize draw. Now, this week, I think it's to win David Dido's book, Intelligent Accountability. In this episode,
You can cry and cry until your eyes are red. You can toss and tumble on a sleepless bed, but you're wasting your time trying to lose the blues.
Welcome to It's
your time you're wasting.
Martin, yet another episode of It's Your Time You're Wasting. This week, talking about free speech and oracy and all of that sort of stuff. Had a good week?
I've had a reasonable week, I think, full of chaos and things like that. But, we always like a bit of chaos after all, don't we? How about your week?
Well, my speech has been very free this week. I've said exactly what I want.
That's good news. That's good news. Well, we've got a bumper episode this evening, as you already heard, and we've got interviews aplenty. We've got Claire Fox, who's going to talk first, I believe, and she's also going to come back later and talk about debating matters as well.
So you talked to Claire, Baroness Fox, is it now?
It is indeed. Baroness Fox of Buckley.
Right. So you talked to her in the week, and so you've got her talking about her Debating Matters, which is an organisation she's been involved with for years now, which is about organising debates for students.
That's right.
But you've also got her talking a little bit about the kerfuffle over at Eton School.
Yes, I think we'll start with that and perhaps look at Debating Matters later on. But if we can, let's go to Claire Fox.
Great. Let's have a look at that, and then we can have a bit. We can wade in as well.
And now we're going to waste a bit of time of, I think, right, I've made a note here. Baroness Fox of Buckley. Is that right?
That is correct.
And you're a non-aligned peer. Is that correct as well?
That is correct. Factually, full marks so far, Martin.
It's the nearest I get to royalty. This a non-aligned peer sounds like is it the one in Brighton? But it's lovely to see you. Thanks for spending some time of your time with us. Obviously, you're very busy with going in and out of the House of Lords. What's it like in there these days?
There's only there's so much social distancing, it's frightening. So there's only 30 peers allowed in the chamber at any one time. A lot of it's done by Zoom, like everything else, and it's driving the peers mad. But I've been going in every day to try and get, as a new girl, trying to get used to it. I think it's probably like what it's like being a new girl in a public school, but I never went to public school. But that's what it feels it would be like. I'm getting used to it.
Let's move on, because we're talking about pupil voice here quite a lot. And of course, recently it's come to the attention of various newspapers and TV stations that Eton is in a slightly interesting place with its pupil voice at the moment. A teacher produced a video about, I think, for the perspective strand, they called it, that sort of perhaps argued from a certain angle and caused a lot of mayhem. Now, you tweeted something in support of the pupil voice of the Eton students, that saying they should have a right to express themselves about whether a teacher remains in their job or not. And I was a bit surprised about that, to tell you the truth, because should pupils have that sort of power to decide these things?
Certainly not, actually. I mean, I'm not suggesting that the head teacher should change the opinion of the management about whether a teacher should be sacked or not because the pupils argued it. That indeed would go against what I believe to be true. I mean, I think that pupils, I want to encourage them to be, as I've just said, to be thoughtful and open-minded. I thought what was fascinating about the Eton letter, though, was it was a very well-argued letter in defense of being open-minded about what education is. And I think that and therefore I agreed with the content of it. So although I don't support the notion of pupil voice trumping teacher voice, you know, it's not that I think that pupils should be consulted on everything. That's not to suggest that I think that every time a pupil opens their mouth, I disregard it, or I think that they're not interesting. If they've got something interesting to say, then good, I'm prepared to listen. But that doesn't mean it should define policy. But I think the Eton example is a very good example of what we're seeing at the moment, which is, you know, the emergence of a new kind of cancel culture and a really prescriptive atmosphere around what is acceptable to say, what pupils can cope with. And I thought that the film that you're referring to, the Perspectives film, I mean, I've watched that video. I mean, it's had a lot more airplay as a consequence of the teacher being sacked than it ever would have done. And it's a kind of sub-Jordan Peterson, you know, attempt at saying, taking on contemporary feminism. About, you know, 3/4 of it I disagree with. But it's a perspectives video. In other words, it's designed to make pupils think. And I have to say that that's to that teacher's credit, that whether that's what he thinks, or who knows whether it's his voice or whether it's a provocation. And just as I've argued about debating matters, you know, there are times when you use arguments as a provocation. It can be a way of making people think. You don't have to always own it. And the head teacher wanted this removing from YouTube, because he said it discredited Eton, and the teacher refused and has subsequently been sacked. The head teacher has stressed it's got nothing to do with the content of the video, which I have to say I myself do not believe, but that's neither here nor there. I think what's interesting is, you know, because I think if that Perspectives video had been done in support of contemporary feminism, you know, in support of the Me Too movement or what have you, the teacher probably would have got a pay rise. You know, I really don't believe the content is unrelated to the reaction. And it also is ironic that he was told to remove it from YouTube because it might discredit the school, when the whole emphasis in this present time is that we've got to use, that teachers have got to learn how to use technology properly and to make films and pre-recorded lectures and so on to encourage educational thought. So I think that maybe the content is what caused the furore. And I was just glad that the pupils constructed such a well-argued defense of why they should be tolerant of different viewpoints and open and exposed to different viewpoints.
There you go. Claire will be back later on in the show talking about debating matters, about their discussions they have and they've set up for schools to get involved with debate teams and how it's different than other debating competitions that are run. And also it's gone around the world apparently. So anyway, more of that later. But what did you think about her views on the Eton kerfuffle?
Well, firstly, I think I'd agree with Claire's take on that what students think is important. They should be encouraged to give their opinions. The letter that was signed by so many of Eton's pupils was well argued and worth their while. It shouldn't influence decisions made in the school just because they've done that. I agree with that. But the real question is, should this poor benighted English teacher, Mr. Nolan, should he have been sacked? And there's some interesting takes on this, aren't there, Martin? What's your view?
My view is let's wait this one out a bit to see what actually is happening here. I think there's more to it than meets the eye.
I think you're right, and obviously we don't know all of the ins and outs, but on the face of it, this has been construed as a free speech issue, but there's also it could also be construed as an authority issue. That if a head teacher of a school has said to a member of staff, I don't think you should publish that in a public forum, and they have been defied, and arguably they're well within their rights to dismiss a member of staff as that kind of behaviour. That's not a free speech issue. That's signing up to the values and the procedures of working for a particular institution, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's lots of other issues here as well, of course, because this comes about because we are filming lessons and putting them into people's homes, and that becomes a bit of an issue as well, doesn't it? Because for the first time, pupils and parents are sharing the screen, and the parents perhaps are getting an insight into what kids are being taught and how they're being taught sometimes, and what the material might be and how it might be put forward. So is this part of the problem here, that perhaps if this hadn't been on YouTube, it was just a lesson behind a classroom door that was shut, perhaps no one would have heard anything about it?
Yeah, well, that's certainly true. I think also I don't know if you've seen the video, Martin. I've seen the video, and it's slightly disingenuous to say that it's no more than a lesson. And apparently, some of the backstory is that the lesson was put up on YouTube, which is quite a interesting choice to make as a teacher. If I've taught lessons at school for children who are self-isolating, I haven't seen fit to put them up on the YouTube channel. But anyway, that was a decision that was made. And then a female member of staff at Eton apparently complained. The head consulted a lawyer, and the advice was that the video should come down whilst discussions were ongoing and whilst thought was given to the appropriateness of it. And apparently, and obviously, we don't know the full truth of any of this, but apparently Mr. Nolan said, no, I refuse to do that. And I've got relatively little sympathy really with that. It seems that it's relatively self-serving to put something up on your own personal YouTube channel, and your employer, for whom you've apparently made the content, has asked you to take it down, and you've refused. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm unfair, but I've got a certain amount of sympathy with the head teacher here. And
it also comes in who owns the material of the lesson.
That is an interesting point.
Is it my film? Is it Eton's film? Is it?
Yeah, I'm not au fait, obviously, with the law on this, but my understanding is that if you make content during the time that you're contracted, it does belong to your employer. But I could be mistaken about that.
And there might be various sort of grey areas here, of course, because when we come to resources and we see the TES website selling resources, is that the teacher selling it or the school selling it or a
That's
bit of
a
both?
very grey area.
Where's
and
the copyright?
Yeah,
But,
absolutely. I think it's lamentable, really, that TES do that, and the sooner they stop doing it, because so much. I mean, I've seen my work plagiarised on there. That work I've made available for free, and someone has thought, I'll sell that on TES.
this is going somewhere I didn't expect. But I read the Guardian earlier today, who said there might be something more going on here, according to them. They a quote here, almost verbatim: Eton fighting off a revolt by those who say Eton has gone aggressively woke. Believe it or not.
Well, they're not the only ones, if it's true.
But if you go to
arguably, maybe it'd be good for Eton to go. I think maybe it'd be good for the sort of boys that go to Eton to be aggressively woke. I'm not sure that I really see the harm in that. That I don't think many of them it'll necessarily stick. And if it does give any of them pause for thought, that might be a good thing.
And if you go to the website now, it sounds like a sort of state school from about 10, 15 years ago, I must say. Welcome to Eton, a vibrant and progressive school, which is committed to independent thought and blah, 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 enhance communication skills, embrace creativity, and encourage teamwork.
Yeah, whatever the hell any of those things are. Yeah, no, absolutely right. Well, I think, the apart from all of that, Claire referred to the Noland video as sub Jordan Peterson, and I think that's exactly where I'd place it. It's not very good, it's not very well argued, it's not very sophisticated. Arguably it's aimed at children, but even so, I think it's a shoddy bit of work. I'd certainly be a little bit embarrassed if that was up, and an argument that I'd made in public. So tough.
Well, interesting that
Claire... I defend Will Nolan's right to have those views. I defend his right to proclaim them. But I think this is a bit more complicated than that. He's been asked by his employer not to do something. He's refused to do it. He's been sacked. Obviously, there's a tribunal coming up. We will see. The more will be revealed, as they say.
Well, Claire goes on to talk about in the interview, which will be released during the week. So it's an extensive interview. So please subscribe and make sure you don't miss it when it comes out.
Absolutely, Martin.
But she talks there about teachers having opinions. Should teachers have opinions? Should they be able to share those opinions and say what their opinions are? Certainly when I worked in a Catholic school, for instance, we were allowed to say what our thoughts were, but also we had to state the Catholic view on things.
Yeah. Did you always know that, Martin?
I always knew that on specific issues of faith. Yes, I made damn sure I did, I tell you.
I went to a Catholic secondary school, and our teachers certainly didn't give us their opinions. Oh, maybe they did, but we got an awful lot of Catholic dogma. This is quite interesting because a few weeks ago, viewers might remember, we had Calvin Robinson on the show, who you might expect to sit on the same side of the fence as Claire Fox on a number of issues. But he was saying that teachers really shouldn't give their opinions, and that actually the law prevented teachers teaching opinion as fact. And he was talking here about what was he talking about now? The word at the tip of my tongue, Martin.
Well, I can't tell you what your word is at the tip of your tongue, I'm afraid, because I'm not sure.
But you can tell us what Calvin was objecting to, can't you?
But it's the Kerry Badenoch speech in Parliament.
Yeah,
he was referring to, and various other things about critical race theory being taught in schools, and the government's policy saying that Marxist dogma, etc., shouldn't be taught in school. So I think that's what his take was, that perhaps we should have a range of views should be presented, but they should be presented in a way that can be debated, yes, but also can be criticised as well.
So I think, I suppose what I think is that if you're a teacher and you're taking a responsible view on this sort of thing, that if you're going to put up a video like Nolan's view on masculinity and how women should be grateful for what's sometimes labelled as toxic masculinity, you should probably put up the contrasting view at the same time argued with the same level of thought and care, and obviously that's not happened.
Yeah, and it's something that's going to run and run, as they say, because I think the Free Speech Union have taken this up as one of their.
Yeah, they have, and I think the thing is maybe this isn't a free speech issue. I absolutely am in favour of free speech, but also I think you've got to respect the rights of employers to give instructions to their employees. I don't think it's as simple as it's being made out by some people.
And the other thing, of course, comes out is if a pupil was sharing these views in class, how would that go down? Is that something that would suddenly sort of raise alarm bells and put them on the prevent agenda or something like that, you know?
I don't think we'd go that far, but I do think as a responsible teacher, you challenge those views and go, okay, well, I can see, you've probably been influenced by Mr. Nolan there, and I'd just like to challenge fact check a few of the opinions that you're citing and offer you an alternative explanation. Yeah, I think that's what a reasonable teacher would do, isn't it, Martin?
Yeah, but I do think the idea of perspectives, having a course called Perspectives, and it is interesting that the person who runs the course, an RE teacher, has resigned over this from that position. So, that like I say, there might be more to it than meets the eye, but certainly perspectives should be discussed, and perhaps a range of views should be discussed, and whether you represent it as your view or say there is a view that states this, that these might be important things to think about.
I think that's absolutely right, and I think that the best bet if you're a teacher and you're working for a school, the best bet is that if you hold these controversial views, or if you're asking people to think about them and debate them, then put it up on your personal YouTube channel.
Anyway, we'll see more of Claire in a bit, and we'll also please look out for the video as it's released during the week. But we're talking about teamwork there and creativity, and one of the areas of teamwork and creativity, of course, is the teaching of drama. And drama is not just a subject as an art form; it's also a form of pedagogy, of learning. And we're talking to Tim Taylor this week about Mantle for the Expert, Mantle of the Expert. I always get that. Mantle of the Expert.
Dorothy Heathcote and et al.
Yeah, so we're going to have a listen to that. And I'm about to waste some time, the time of Tim Taylor's. Tim, I'm sorry to waste your time this afternoon. It's a lovely, lovely day here in London. Is the sun shining where you are?
It's in Norfolk. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's pretty nice. Yesterday it was filthy, but today it's pretty sunny and clear.
Well, filthy in Norfolk sounds like the sort of a title of a rather a strange sort of paperback that perhaps we could get into that. I think I might write that book, Filthy in Norfolk. Right. It's lovely to talk to you today. We're looking at oracy, and oracy is a term that's bandied about by educationalists and politicians even, and it's something that is gaining some ground, particularly on the left, interestingly enough. I think on the right, perhaps it's more called rhetoric and terms like that. But could you tell me, what do you think of oracy as a term?
Well, not wanting to offend anybody, and because an awful lot of people that I like very much and respect who use this word, but it's not a word that I immediately want to put my arms around. It feels a bit distancing to me, and I'm not 100% sure I know what it means beyond speaking and listening. And that obviously there'll be people who'll be slapping their forehead at this point and going, "Oh God, that's just a part of it." But it's one of those words in education that come along every now and again. I guess it's come from numeracy. That I wonder why we're using that term rather than something that's kind of plain speaking and says what it does, like speaking and listening.
Yeah, so it's certainly interesting when you type in oracy onto Google or anything like that, or Word or whatever. It gets those little red dots underneath, like a word that doesn't quite recognize itself yet. So right. It's not in common usage, shall we say, outside the educational field. But It's about kids speaking, isn't it? Getting kids to speak, really, and I suppose to speak well in some ways. Could you tell me, in terms of your particular interests in Mantle of the Expert, drama for learning, all these things, the importance of kids being able to speak their own minds, perhaps?
Yes. So yeah, I mean, I've been rather flippant before, but Oracy, yes, I think it's about the use of formal language and being able to speak well, as you say. Now, speaking well involves a number of things. Obviously, having a wide vocabulary, being able to speak clearly and in a way that will be understood. So, if we look at something like Mantle of the Expert or Drama for Learning, then I think those kinds of approaches create lots of possibilities in the classroom for that kind of development, which I think we all agree is something that we want to see. I mean, wherever you are on the educational spectrum, I think we're all of us agreed that being able to speak well and being able to use language efficiently and imaginatively and effectively is something that we'd all want children to develop in schools.
And you've already mentioned there, and I think there's two sides of drama there: drama for learning, Mantle the Expert, which perhaps comes under the umbrella of drama for learning, and there's also drama as an art form as well. So for people who don't understand the differences between those three, could you give us a little flavour of what that might be?
Well, yes, I think drama for learning is an umbrella term that involves a number of different approaches, and Mantle the Expert is an approach that uses drama and inquiry. Theatre and formal drama, academic drama, I guess, is part of a spectrum of theatre studies, I think, within education. And there is clearly an overlap, and people who use drama for learning approaches for teaching the curriculum use theatre conventions, but I think there's really quite a big difference in terms of intent between the different approaches. You're much better placed than I am, Martin, to talk about the drama and theatre side of things. That's not something I've ever taught.
Right, but so you are particularly interested in Mantle of the Expert being something from the Dorothy Heathcote school, the Dorothy Heathcote tradition, if you like, of drama teaching. Could you let's open up about that a bit?
Yeah, so Dorothy Heathcote was an academic and a teacher that taught very widely in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s up until the 2000s, and for a time was very influential after a BBC documentary about her work called Three Looms Waiting. And for a while, her work became quite widely known. Now, not to kind of go into a long history about this, but in the sort of late 70s, early 80s, Heathcote got quite frustrated because there was a feeling, a kind of a conversation going around that there was something special about Dorothy Heathcote, that people couldn't use drama for learning in the way that she was using it. And so she always sort of argued against that and said that anybody could use the things that she was doing. And so she invented something called Mantle of the Expert. Now, Mantle of the Expert is a way of using drama in the classroom. It's a way of using drama to contextualize the curriculum. Now, when we talk about drama, people imagine full-on kind of role-playing or kind of long periods of improvisation or or acting out stories is another kind of term that's often used. But it's really not like that. The idea about Mantle of the Expert is that there's an imaginary context, which is a narrative, an ongoing story that's often a situation that can develop into something longer term, that the teacher can use in order to contextualize the curriculum learning that they're trying to develop with their students. But that fiction can stop and start. You can step into it and you can come out of it. as much as you like. And there's actually very little kind of identifiable drama, as you might call it, in a Mantle of the Expert classroom. They're stepping in, exploring it, and coming out and reflecting on it. And there's as much teaching, if not a lot more teaching, in terms of the curriculum, but it's the context that's created by Mantle of the Expert.
Right. Okay. So I'm, let's say I'm getting a bit confused here. Could you
Right.
give me some concrete examples, perhaps with reference to one of the pieces you've actually done with a school, about what you might mean?
So, okay. So there's a school in Norwich, an infant school in Norwich, that is studying space at the moment, and year ones. So the teachers worked out what the curriculum is for space, what the science is, learning the names of the planets, finding out about light and dark, and all the other sorts of things that are in the curriculum about space. They also want to develop the children's writing in context, so finding different reasons for writing. They want to develop speaking and listening and a whole bunch of other things. They're going to connect art, DT, and all kinds of things. Now, in a topic-based approach, which is something that was very popular in primary schools for a long time, you'd put space in the middle, and then you'd have all these kind of connected activities. Now, what Mantle of the Expert does is it creates a story context where inside the story, the children are cast in the role of people with responsibility. That's the mantle bit. The mantle bit is a metaphor for the kinds of responsibilities that experts have. So in this context that we're working on together, the students are two people who are in contact with a spaceship that's out in space beyond Jupiter. And for some reason, which they're not entirely sure about at the beginning, they've lost contact with the spaceship. Now, in their role in the fiction is to work out what's gone wrong and to reconnect with them. And NASA are the people that they work for. So in Mantle of the Expert, you have a team, you have a client, and you have a commission, which you can see those three elements are there. Now, because that story is going on, the idea is that the children get involved in that story. They get wrapped up in that story. There's attention to it. They start developing a concern for the people on the spaceship and other things that are happening. And that creates the purpose for learning the curriculum.
There we go.
Oh, very interesting, Martin. So
Mantle of the Expert.
You told me a lovely anecdote a number of years ago about seeing Dorothy Heathcote backstage at a conference.
Yeah, she was staying in the same hotel as me, and we were both taking part in the conference, and she was due to do the keynote. And before the keynote, I heard her in her bedroom. Don't worry, it's not going to get too personal here. In her bedroom, she was warming up, doing a drama warm-up, and she was doing it by singing very loudly along to Queen's "We Are the Champions," getting herself in the mood. I can imagine you doing that before one of your lessons, David.
Yes, well, and I know for a fact that you do that before your conference appearances, Martin. So it works. Well worth doing. No, I always do a bit of a fist bump and play some Queen before stepping into the classroom. I normally pipe the music into the classroom as well to get the kids enthused about my presence.
And of course, it would be, you make sure that the 70s, 80s rock music is the music for the kids these days, of course.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I might use a bit of Bon Jovi, mix it up a bit. But yeah, pretty much. Obviously, there's a lot more that Tim talks about in the full interview. So viewers should subscribe to hear the full unexpurgated version of all of that. But I'm always quite struck, and I know this is a bit of a bugbear of yours, Martin, about the distinction between drama as an academic subject and as an art form and drama for learning. And forgive me if I'm mischaracterizing you here, but you're not a huge fan of drama for learning, are you, Martin?
Certainly in the secondary school, I am very much in favour of drama as an art form and being taught as an art form rather than getting into the misty areas of where the crossover might be, which is sometimes done in Key Stage 3, perhaps in a secondary school. I talk about this with Tim in the interview, and
Right.
he does say that Mantle tends to be used more in primary schools and infant schools, where it's an extension of play, perhaps.
And none the worse for that.
Now, let's move on, because you've got an interview with Mary Myatt.
Yeah, just a brief one. When you said you were putting together some interviews on Oracy, I thought, who do you go to except the Myatt herself? So we've got the majestic Miss Mary Myatt talking about some of the problems as she sees it with the way Oracy is conceived of in schools. And I'm very pleased to be speaking to everyone's favourite educator, Mary Myatt, who is going to talk to us briefly about the importance of Oracy in education. Mary.
Well, very happy to join you this morning to chat about Oracy. I think it's the poorest of poor relations in terms of provision across the sector. And so this isn't universal, but I think because there's some schools doing some great work, but there are a number of reasons why I think there's a problem with Oracy. And the first is there's a kind of assumption that virtually everyone can talk. And so it just sort of naturally happens. And so we tend not as a sector to pay attention to the fact that if we want to develop something, we need to be explicit about it and we need to practice it. And the ancients knew this. Rhetoric and oratory have traditions going back thousands of years. There are schools like School 21, like others, who understand the power of this. Now, if we look at the English national curriculum, there are 4 elements in the English national curriculum. And I think it's no coincidence that writing is number 4 after speaking, listening, and reading. I might be reading too much into this. I don't know. But as a sector, we're obsessed with getting to the written outcome. And what's unique about English, or more specifically literacy, is that this goes across the curriculum, unlike any other subject. So literacy and speaking, listening, reading and writing underpin every other subject. So it's got this sort of unique place within the provision for children that beyond the English subject as a subject as its own domain, is you've got this notion of literacy across the curriculum. And it just seems that writing is privileged, and I really worry about that. And there's all sorts of reasons. I think that we're obsessed with evidence. Like, nothing's happened in my lesson if there's no written work. Well, children have got to be fed before they get to writing. As James Britton said in 1970, writing floats on a sea of talk. Now, it's not just in that instrumentalist sense, because we want to get great writing. There's something much deeper going on here as well, and that is providing opportunities for us to articulate what we know, what we don't know, but also to express ourselves at the deepest level. So I just think it's a great shame that there are all these assumptions made about it, and it's just not privileged in the way that I think that it ought to be.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. That is wonderful, Mary.
Life.
And I'm glad she mentioned rhetoric.
No,
And it's good to hear. One of the words of the trivium there, of course. The idea as well of oracy being a problematic word, that Tim talked about this as well to me. I think we need to formalize it, to give it more kudos, if you like, or to put it up the thing by saying rhetoric. It gives it more power, doesn't it?
Well, it's interesting. So it was coined by apparently by a fellow called Andrew Wilkinson, an education researcher in the 1960s, and it was designed to give the idea of spoken English parity with more scientific sounding things, and obviously largely ignored at the time. But I think it's taken on a Frankenstein life of its own, hasn't it? And it appeals to people because it sounds as if you just talk about speaking and listening. If you're just speaking or if you're just listening, then that's something you could do anywhere. That's something you could do at home. But if you're doing oracy, then goodness me, that sounds important, doesn't it?
You can't do oracy at home then, apparently.
Good God, no, Martin. Do you not know anything?
No oracy at home in this house.
No.
We run like monks here, I tell you, in a silent order. Well, if only. But there's lots of different parts of oracy, and one of those, of course, is debate.
Yeah. Well, there's an interesting thing there that you talk about rhetoric, but debate, and I know this is very close to your heart, Martin, is more perhaps the dialectic. It's the clash of ideas, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's a vital part of education, as we were talking earlier about perspectives, but it's also something that's been close to Claire Fox for many years, and the organization she helped set up, Debating Matters, is a competition for schools, and we do put out the details about this in the talk, so if schools would like to get involved,
well worth getting involved.
it is. But there are other debating institutions around there, whether it be the English Speaking Union or whoever, if you prefer those. But have a look at what Claire has to say about debate. Can you tell me something? You were involved in schools through an organization called Debating Matters. Can you tell me a bit about that, please?
Yeah, so the Academy of Ideas, which I am still the director of, started a schools debating competition for sixth formers called Debating Matters, about 15, 16 years ago. It's now organised through an educational charity for the last 2 years, but I'm still involved very much as a supporter and a judge. But Debating Matters is a form of schools debating that emphasises substance over style. And one of the reasons why we set it up was because I was forever being asked to judge schools debating competitions and was kind of, I always said yes and so on. But I was struck by how much the emphasis was on, rhetorical flourishes, not rhetoric as you understand it, Martin, but more kind of showing off and ways of explaining things. And there was a lot of neglect on the content. So when we started Debating Matters, we changed the format so that the most important thing was the research that the pupils had done and a cross-examination and interrogation of their ideas, less the way that they performed. And it's been a great success, and we are very proud of the fact that it's kind of gone international. It happens in India. There's been a form of Debating Matters that we started and has carried on in Israel. It carries on in Germany. There's a new Debating Matters competition, and it still operates. We've even managed, or the team have even managed to get it to operate during COVID. So there's now, as we speak, at this very moment, there is part of a Debating Matters Championship online going on. And I keep getting messages from colleagues telling me, oh, that was a really good point that somebody just made, and so on and so forth. So it's not the same, but the most important thing, as I say, is that the pupils, when they speak, they do their formal 3-minute speeches, but after that, there's a panel of judges who don't just sit and judge them, but actually ask them to justify what they've just said, really push them to explain their arguments more fully. And that's really when the whole thing comes alive.
And is it something that's just filled with public school debating societies, or is it across all classes and all races and genders, etc., etc.? I mean, tell me.
When we started, it's interesting you should say that, because when we started, obviously, I was interested in getting schools that aren't usually accustomed to debating to learn how to debate. So that was my aim, to get state schools involved in debating. But I also got irritated that whenever I went for funding applications, there was an attempt at saying, well, we don't want loads of public schools in, so will support it if it's for, you know, socially deprived areas or state schools. And that annoyed me as well, because I wanted a level playing field. I mean, I wanted state school pupils to be able to debate pupils from public schools, private schools. So we refused just to make it a state school debate competition, but I think it's something like 89% of the schools involved are state schools. The other thing which you might be interested in is that when we first started, there was a criticism made by a lot of teachers, it carries on actually, which is that the very hard line questioning by the judges would be bad for the self-esteem of the pupils, that they would not be able to cope with that level of criticism, because and their self-esteem would be damaged by rather frank feedback from the adult interrogators. Actually, the opposite was the case, which was that the pupils were so relieved that there was a group of adults who were prepared to say that was a rubbish contribution. I don't mean that people gratuitously insult the pupils, but didn't just say, oh, how interesting you are because you're 16 and you've got an opinion, which apparently is the thing that one was meant to do, but was prepared to distinguish between a well-argued case and a poorly argued case. And the pupils themselves really liked it, so it became something of a cult hit. And I think that's to the credit of the format that it does that.
And can people, I mean, talking about pupils holding their own and knowing their stuff and being able to stand up and argue with an adult, perhaps if they are challenged about something. In terms of the opinions that are being raised by students, if they're talking from a woke point of view, let's say, how does that go down?
It doesn't matter. That's not the point at all. I mean, in fact, it's a debating competition. So we provide, or the Debating Matters competition provides topic guides, and those topic guides are an opening 1,000 word essay that gives both sides of the argument in the round, and then there's 4 articles for the argument, 4 articles against, lots of background readings that they can draw on. This is not to confine their reading, but to inspire them to do deeper reading. And part of why we set it up was to say, you know, you think there's only one answer to this question. Well, there aren't. Look, here are well-argued arguments on the other side of why you happen to be. So it doesn't make it, we're not interested in the politics of the pupils at all. We're interested that they argue well. And just as an indication, some of the alumni from the Debating Matters competition, I think we've got the youngest MSP in Scotland for the Green Party. There's the youngest Tory councillor, I think, was a Debating Matters alumni. And there's somebody who's an organiser for Momentum, who's a Debating Matters alumni. So it's very good to me that we've inspired people to want to be involved in politics, but which politics is entirely up to them.
Right. So it's about freedom of thought for them, not necessarily towing any particular party line, from Momentum to the Tories to the Greens.
Yeah. But also they've got a topic. So say the topic, one of the topics the other day was on reparation. I think was on statues, yeah, and whether statues should be removed or not. Now, somebody like me's got a well-known position on this, which is that I'm not keen on the contemporary bout of iconoclasm and pulling down statues and so on and so forth. But the point is that it's a very important debate in society about the way we come to deal with historical problems in relation to people being honoured whose views today offend modern sensibilities. And that's an important discussion. And the pupils are given a side in the debate, and they don't choose which side they're on. And they're asked to do the research to argue the best case they can for either of those sides. And the judges are not there to say, I disagree with you or I didn't agree with you. They're there to decide who put forward the best argument. And from the point of view of sixth formers, I think it's just important that they realise there are 2 sides to that argument, that they look behind the headlines, and then they're not either trying to tick a box to be woke or tick a box to be anti-politically correct. They're there to win the argument for either of those sides. And that's on every single debate topic, that's what you would do.
And you mentioned sixth formers there. Is there age limits to Debating Matters?
We tried to confine it to sixth formers Actually, we work with lots of FE colleges, but 16 to 18-year-olds, because in a way they're young adult debates, and some schools use the materials from Debating Matters to initiate and discussions with younger pupils, and that's fine if they think that's appropriate. But as an outside organisation, we wanted to very much make it a place where you could assume a certain maturity in attitude and have quite challenging topics. So that's why we confined it to sixth formers, and also partly because I used to teach in further education. I'm interested in that age group, and it's very much on the cusp of them going into that world of universities in some instances, or many instances, where we know that they will come up against people who will say, you can't debate that subject is off limits, off bounds, and we wanted to encourage a more open-minded approach to debate and discussion.
Right, and you can get in touch via Google, I take it, Debating Matters. A school can get in touch with you that way, and perhaps we'll put the website address.
Thank you, that would be good. I can't remember what it is now, so
Okay,
my colleagues will kill me, and I'll pass that on to you.
No, we'll put it down there, definitely. So look underneath this channel, and you'll see the Debating Matters connector, or whatever it is, link. That's the word I'm looking for. Now,
wonderful. Big fan of formal debates. Something I used to do back in the day as a teacher. I once organised a debate at my school, which Liam Fox came to judge, which was a bit of a treat.
Is everyone called Fox who's involved in debates? Is
yes,
that what it is?
It's the law. I think Liam and Claire are they a couple?
Not that I'm aware of, and as for Lawrence Fox, I don't even want to contemplate where this could go. But
moving on, Martin.
Moving on, as they say. I think the important point there about you're told which side you're going to be on, and actually it's about structuring a debate, which means you have to listen to the other side to win a debate.
I think for students to have to argue something that they might not necessarily believe in, and to be convincing, I think it's a really great thing for them to do.
And I think it can be part of lessons as well as part of the curriculum. You don't have to debate just climate change, etc., etc., etc. It can also be part of what you think of this chapter in this book, or this character, etc., etc.
Absolutely. And talking about chapters in books, debating is the final chapter in Sarah Davies's new book, which is coming out later this month, published by show sponsors John Catt, talking about oracy. And seeing as we've been talking about oracy, let's let Sarah talk to us a little bit about her book. Hi, I'm with Sarah Davies, who has written a book called Talking About Oracy. So we're going to talk about talking about oracy. You can see this could get unmanageable and unwieldy quite quickly. First of all, Sarah, congratulations. This is your first book, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Thank you very much. First book, first time out of here, and first podcast interview as well.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes.
So. Sarah, we haven't met before, and so just for the viewers, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to write the book?
So obviously the book started to come into fruition over the over lockdown period, and I think a lot of it transpired from the way that the government handled and the way that it was handled as to how we would support students going forward. And particularly with GCSE, one of the biggest things was the spoken language part and the eradication of the recording element of the spoken language. And I think from watching a lot of the responses to this and to the way that people perceived how this could be taken, it got me thinking about just how we see oracy in the curriculum and also how we see oracy in education, mainly because of the fact that I have an 18-month-old child and I have a 9-year-old child. And obviously, when they go through that earlier stage of development, we have quite a lot of assessments that are founded on their perceptions of oracy and how they're talking and what language and their dialogue and everything like that. And then, like with my 9-year-old, and when we're in secondary school, which is where I'm from, and it's less so. And oracy almost seems to become kind of lost in this sea of ideas. You've got your triads, so you've got your literacy, your numeracy, and your oracy. And the fundamental ones that are being focused on are your literacy and your numeracy. And in oracy, all of a sudden, as a result of the decisions that were made, it appeared to just exemplify how oracy had been pushed into almost like a subject-specific area. Like all of a sudden it was mainly it was English, and the concept of spoken language was an English subject focus point. And I think a lot of before I qualified as a teacher, I did a lot with EAL, I did a lot with behaviour, but also I was a recruitment consultant. So I was a bit of a jack of all trades before I got into teaching. And I think having that experience of just how important it is to be able to communicate really drove this idea forward of, well, hold on a minute here, we're losing out on something. If by the end of if because of everything that happened because of the pandemic, our students are leaving us and we're concerned about their academic progress, about how much they managed to achieve during that time, and no matter what transition stage they were in. But also, was that student ready for the outdoor world? Was that student ready for job interviews? Was that student ready to have discussions and communicate with different audiences and participate in different roles? And it really got me thinking about all the way from nursery, primary, secondary, college, and even in leadership. How are we using oracy and how can it be used more effectively?
Okay, thanks. So let me ask you another. Might sound like a stupid question. We're using the word oracy. What actually is it? Is it different to speaking?
So oracy is the concept of, in my opinion, oracy is the concept of communication. Oracy is however you communicate. It wouldn't be fair to say that it was just the idea of speaking, because obviously we will have people that are almost inaudible, so they're not able to communicate in that way. And we have to think about, what is it in regards to tone? Is it in regards to body language? The physical components of it, the content. Oracy is basically how you are communicating and how you are able to communicate with someone.
Okay, right. So you've talked a little bit about why we're focusing on that. And why you think it's important. Tell me, as part of it, how important do you think standard English is? Should children be taught to speak in standard English, or do you think that we should be embracing and accepting of the different dialects that children might bring to school?
It's quite interesting, that one, because there is a chapter that I focus on dialect discrimination, and we talk about and we look at dialect discrimination and the fact that obviously it was something that was quite prevalent in the past, the mid kind of century, but it still exists now. And we know, ironically enough, from an actual teacher point of view, this discussion was being had today with year 11s in the corridor, so not even one that was brought about by me, and they were talking about the Liverpudlian dialogue. And my take on that, and we actually ended up getting into a conversation. Now, I'm from Oldham, so our language is kind of like this crossbreed between Manchester and Yorkshire. So we've got a certain tone to the way that we speak, and sometimes it sounds, all right, and then you put me in a car and it's true Yorkshire Oldham kind of crossover, and it's about being taught to communicate effectively, no matter what dialogue it is. Like whether you are, whether you're from Liverpool, whether you're from Birmingham, or whether you're EAL, So whether, it's English as an additional language, it's about how you're able to come across and how that communication is able to take place, as opposed to are we, and less so, but still existing in the background, are we actually basing our ideas on the sound that we're hearing and the locality of it, or the demographic of that person that's talking.
There you are. Fascinating stuff, Martin. And while we're on the subject of books, we've got a particularly exciting book that...
I wonder whose book that is. We're going to do an interview over the Christmas holidays with David.
Well, maybe we will. It depends on whether Martin can be bothered to read the book.
I need to win a copy then. Perhaps my name will come out of this hat.
Are you a subscriber, Martin?
I am.
Just don't forget, only our subscribers are entered into Martin's hat. He cuts them out each week. What we really need is to have so many subscribers in a given week that Martin's scissors blunt and he's unable to fill his hat.
Anyway, it's a rather sad story, that. I think it sounds like a grim fairy tale. The man who couldn't fill his... No. Anyway...
it's a bit like
Smith Carl 4. Smith Carl 4.
Smith Carl 4. If you email us on hello@wastingyourtime.co.uk, we will send you a copy, perhaps even a signed copy of my book, Intelligent Accountability.
And the other subscriber is Carmela Taylor. Carmela Taylor.
Email us and we will send you your copy of the book. If you want it signed, just mention it in the email.
just send us an email. I'm interested to hear that after this very thoughtful program we put together today, and the biggest number of comments in the comments section underneath the video are about filthy in Norfolk. About whether that book should come out.
I've assured people that your book is not available in any good bookseller.
Certainly not. I've already written it during the show, by the way. It's got 20,000 words.
Yes,
very thoughtful,
and it's extraordinarily and beautifully erotic, isn't it, Martin?
Anyway, L4LTV is talking about whether the teacher should have put stuff on YouTube or not, and whether that was a good idea.
Well, don't put Filthy in Norfolk up on YouTube.
I certainly won't. That's sort of, very 70s. What's that guy's name? Robin, I can't remember. He was in all those sorts of films. Anyway, let's move hurriedly to the end. I think we're getting on there. Please subscribe, because we've got all these longer term videos will be coming out this week, with the interviews with Claire, with Tim, with Mary.
Not with Mary. That was it.
That was the entire thing with Mary.
Yeah, we kept it snappy.
But I certainly know the Claire Fox interview is controversial at points, I'm sure, for some people, and therefore will be worth looking at, and perhaps also putting it down some mentions in the comments about that when you get to see it next week.
Yeah, and if you'd like to contribute to It's Your Time You're Wasting, get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. But thank you ever so much for bearing with us and wasting your very precious time with us on a Friday evening. We love you, and we want to have your children, don't we, Martin?
Speak for yourself, dear. I'm not going to go that far. Goodbye, I think, is probably the best way.
Goodbye from me, and goodbye from him.
Me as well.
You can cry and cry until your eyes are red. You can toss and tumble on a sleepless bed, but you're wasting your time trying to lose the blues. Lose the blues, lose the blues. You can walk the streets through the lonely night. You can tell yourself that everything's alright, but you're wasting your time trying to lose the blues. Lose the blues. Well, you got that someone on your mind, those memories behind. You can run and hide, but you will find that where you go, the blues go. You may think you're winning every now and then, but until you hold her in your arms again, you're wasting